Yo, what is up, you guys? So today we're going to be talking about my top 10 tips for winning in teamfight tactics. And before we get into that, if you're coming from Dota Underlords, don't click away because this game is about to blow up and you're going to be happy that you watched this video because there are a few things that are different between those games. But anyways, guys, let's get right into it. My first tip number 10, is the starting characters. So when you start the game, you get a champion for free. Now, when picking your first champion, there are 3 things you want to think about. 1, synergies that you can make with that champion. 2, the item they're holding, and 3, the tier. So the tier they are isn't the biggest deal in the world because there's only going to be tier 1 and tier 2, and tier 2 is only worth 2 gold, tier 1 is worth 1 gold. But typically you do want to take the tier 2 just because they are usually more powerful, at least their abilities are. But sometimes you want to take tier 1 because they're holding a nice item, or you can make a nice synergy early. So in a game that I'm going to show you later on, I did pick a Vayne with the bow. And the reason I picked the bow is because that can build into a lot of nice ranged items for Vayne. And anyways, let's get into the next tip. So tip number 9 is for the first 3 rounds for minions. So basically this is when you want to start thinking about what kind of synergies you're going to build. So based off the first character you picked and then the first selection from the store is what you want to start building off of. Now, it's obviously not too late to just wait till the next round, but by the time you're at the 3rd round, you want to have a good idea of what you're going to go into the first fight with. And winning the first few fights is super important because you get more gold if you're on a winning streak. And not only that, I believe that every single piece of HP in teamfight tactics makes a big difference, especially late game when the teams are just super even and you're trying to decide like how to counter your opponent. You want as many rounds as you can. You want to be able to last as many rounds as you can because eventually you can catch up even if you're behind. And if you're losing like 10 HP within stage 1 or something like that, you might not have that opportunity like other people might later in the game. So what are some good synergies for your very first fight? Well, the most common one that I would suggest for sure, unless you want to try something like crazy, is Noble Knight. So basically you're going to have Vayne, Garen, Mordekaiser or Darius, and Fiora. The reason you want to have this is because Knight itself gives you a nice front line. They take reduced damage, and you can have a range in the back. Obviously, you're probably not going to have too many crazy item builds. You might get lucky and be able to build a nice item. And obviously this is not the only build you can do, but I definitely recommend this for people who are newer to the game, or if you find some nice ranged items, because I think Vayne is one of the best ranged characters just because of her ability, and also I liked having the ranged synergy later on in the game. So ideally, if I was going into the first fight, my team would look something like Garen, Vayne, Fiora, Mordekaiser. The reason I picked Mordekaiser over Darius is because Mordekaiser's ability can reach the back line, but not only that, but I'll be building up a strong Mordekaiser because later in the game, if I can pick up Kindred, I not only have a range synergy, but I have a Phantom synergy, and Phantom is super broken, and there's only 3 Phantoms in the game, and it's pretty clear why, because the synergy is super broken, and the only Phantom synergies you can have are Mordekaiser, Kindred, and Karthus, and you only need 2 of them. Kindred and Karthus cost a lot of gold, and you can only find them later in the game. Anyways, that's just my sample build for the first couple of fights. Okay, so the next tip is the placement of your team. Now, this is super important. You cannot have your ranged squishies in the front who do like pretty much all the damage. They have to be in the back or out to the sides, okay? That's pretty much it. Even if you're fighting a team full of assassins, if you have your squishies in the sides, they're going to be attacking whatever is in the back. Now, super late game, you can obviously predict this because your enemy is not going to like sell all their level 3 assassins just to mess you up, right? They're not going to do that. They're not going to switch those out. They do way too much damage. So you need to move your ADCs to the side for that kind of situation. Other than that, pretty much stage 1 through 3, you want to be having your ADCs in the back, your front line in the front, and you just want it to happen like that because basically your front line's going to be taking all the damage, your ADCs are going to be doing the damage, and that's just pretty much how it goes. Now let's move into buying things in the shop, buying XP and stuff like that. So a couple tips I have for, spending gold and when to spend it, when to reroll. Basically, when you start getting on a win streak, especially if you're on a win streak, this is when you have your chance to reroll. You want to use that extra gold to reroll so you can start building some level 2s, level 3s, and keep that win streak going. And also, it's not a bad idea to buy some XP especially if you have a champion on the bench that you can throw in and add to a synergy that's already existing or create a new synergy. So if you went with the Mordekaiser, Garen, Fiora, Vayne build in the start, the next champion you could be looking to pick up is something maybe like Ashe for now, mainly because of her ranged synergy, and she's also really good just because of her ability. And if you can also get that glacial synergy going, that'll make her even better. So something to keep in mind is even if you do pick up an Ashe and you have that range synergy and your comp is pretty good for now, you want to start picking up people for the late game. Like for example, you want to start picking up Lucians, you want to start picking up obviously Leona later in the game, because if you can get that 6 noble synergy, everyone is going to be super crazy broken. Just for an example for this build that we're kind of like going through right now. And I think a lot of new players, they make the mistake of not picking up champions when they see them that could work later on when they have more space in their party. And what they don't realize is if you buy a champion, you can just sell it for the same amount of gold, and obviously the only thing that you're going to be losing is that champion, and you can't like undo and then get that champion back. But you're probably going to find them later on. But anyways, the important thing is if you do have space on your bench, if you can afford to pick up a champion that can synergize later on, make sure to have it with you, just so you know later in the game if you do get that open slot and you can put one of these champions in, then you're going to be ready to do so. Also, a quick note, if you find that there's a selection in the shop that you really like and you just don't have enough gold that turn, because you earn 5 gold every turn plus gold if you're on a winning streak, etc., you can lock that selection from the shop. And honestly, if it's a full selection, sometimes I even lock if there's 3 left and I only want 1 of them because I've bought everything else. Sometimes I do that, but if it's a full selection, I would like to think that this is pretty much the same as getting a new selection, right? Because it's a full selection and obviously there's something in there that you want. Don't be afraid to lock this selection. It's right above the reroll option. Now my next tip is talking about items. So you're going to be tempted in the beginning to throw some of these items on your characters, and sometimes that's not a bad idea. Like if you do plan on keeping Vayne, Garen, Mordekaiser, Fiora, all of those till the end, you'll actually see I won a game with that exact same build that I'm talking about right now. But if you do plan on throwing a chain vest on Mordekaiser, for example, that's not a bad idea unless you plan on switching him out, because the difference in Underlords to Teamfight Tactics is in Underlords you can drag items off and drag them on whenever you want. The only way you can get an item off someone in Teamfight Tactics is if you sell it. So you want to be very careful, because there are certain combinations of items that work really well with some characters. So for example, for a spellcaster, even like Mordekaiser or something like Rabadon's Death Cap or Luden's Echo. So Rabadon's Death Cap is Rod and Rod. Luden's Echo is Tear and Rod. These types of things are pretty good for people who rely on spells rather than passives, because this is just going to do a bunch more damage and it's going to help your team out a lot. Because if you hold some items, you can build some really powerful things. So for example, with that Vayne build we were talking about, if you can get 2 bows on her, you can make a rapid fire cannon which doubles her range. She can literally sit in the back corner of Teamfight Tactics and just snipe away at people, and I can get that thing early. I just pretty much win the game, because I'm just going to go on a huge win streak. I'm going to be able to re-roll, I'm going to be able to buy XP, I'm going to have all this extra gold to get way ahead of my enemies. Also, there are a lot of item combinations. I'm going to have a link in the description. Also, I'm going to show some of them up here. Make sure to go check out the link in the description. It's just going to be like a little cheat sheet for anyone looking for combinations of items. Now, while we're talking about items, let's talk about the most important item in the game, in my opinion, which is the spatula. Now the spatula, you can combine it in certain ways that are so impactful for your team. Basically, whoever gets lucky and can get a few level 3s and can use spatulas to their advantage are going to win the game every time. There's really no other way to describe how to win in Teamfight Tactics other than that. The spatula is super important. You can make some crazy items on your ranged characters. You can increase your team size, basically get a level up. If you use 2 spatulas, you get a level up. I think that's one of the best uses for a spatula, honestly, because you don't have to spend like 20 gold to level up, or like 50 gold. Like later in the game, it costs so much to level up that if you can get 2 spatulas, you're gonna be way ahead of your enemies. Like there's no way they're gonna catch up. Like you could get 6 nobles around stage 5 if you can get 2 spatulas. But not only that, the spatula is super awesome because you can create a synergy using the spatula in a special item. So for example, in the game that I'm going to show you right now, I put a chain vest on Fiora just because I had it laying around, and then I picked up a spatula during a selection, so I sold that champion, I took the spatula, I put it on Fiora, and that makes her a knight. So I already had Garen and Mordekaiser, which are both knights, and so I have a knight synergy going, and that gives Fiora 20 damage reduction. And I think that just helped me out a lot because now she's a little bit more tanky. She can cast her spell, which does damage and it stuns the enemy, and it keeps her alive longer. I thought it was really useful. It seemed like it helped me out a lot. Move on to the next tip. So I'm going to be talking about a few tier 3s to look for and to watch out for. So one tier 3 that I always look for, even if I have like a game plan, I have a solid team, is Veigar. So if you can get a level 2 Veigar, his ability will one-shot any level 1. The reason for that is because his ability says that he can instantly kill anything a lower level than him. So if you can somehow get a level 3 Veigar around stage 3, stage 4, you're going to be one-shotting half their team. I actually had a game with a Veigar like that. I actually didn't win the game, but there were so many fights that I won because Veigar would one-shot someone with full items, but they were level 2, and I had a level 3 Veigar, so it was really useful to have Veigar around. On the other side of things, there are some tempting tier 3s. Now, I'm going to name 2 of them, and one of them is really good, and one of them is not so good unless you have a crazy synergy with it. So, the one that is pretty good, but people are going to think is terrible because she dies in like one hit and she's pretty useless at level 1, is Shyvana. Now Shyvana is extremely useful, but only if you have a synergy and only if you can put items on her, or she's level 2 at the very least. Now the reason why she's super important is because her shape-shifting synergy will give her more HP, plus her shape-shifting abilities do damage, and she's really good when she's able to shapeshift. But the thing that is really awesome is when she can be paired with Aurelion Sol, because the dragon synergy makes her immune to magic, which is just going to be extremely powerful. But a lot of people who pick up Shyvana and don't realize these things and put her in the front line because she's a melee and think that, well, she needs mana to transform, she's just going to die first, like every single round, she's not going to help at all. And then a tier 3 that I would watch out for is actually Volibear. Now he has 650 HP at level 1, which is like average, I guess. I don't know, it's alright, but his ability doesn't do a ton of damage, and honestly he's only good if you have a brawler synergy. Now you're gonna be confused because he's a glacial, right? You're probably gonna want to pair him with Ashe, you're probably gonna pair him with Braum, you're gonna put him in the front line when you have Ashe, right? He's gonna die very quickly unless he's at least level 2, and honestly he really only works with brawlers. You should really only pick him up if you have a glacial plus some brawlers and you want to throw Volibear in there. But stay away from Volibear if you're only looking for the glacial synergy, because it's probably not as good as you think it is. Other than those 2 picks, most of the tier 3s are pretty stable that you can just throw in. Like for example, Morgana, you just put her in the back line, her ability is amazing. Kennen, same thing. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about those mid-game to late game selections, so when you get the free champion and the circle thing. Now, these are super important times because there are going to be 3 main things you're going to be looking for. 1, can you sabotage your opponents by taking one of these pieces, right? So, for example, you see someone's got a brand in his party and a brand on the bench. He's obviously going to be looking for a brand so he can have a level 2 brand, right? So that's like just one of the things you want to look for, because when you're mid to late game, you're going to notice who's going to be way in the lead, or, you know, there's not going to be that many people left, etc. So yeah, the first thing you want to look for is if you can sabotage your enemies. And then 2, is there anything that can actually like help you? So for example, if you're looking for a level 3 Vayne, you might want to actually pick a Vayne rather than something like Leona, right? Because it'll be way more useful to pick up this Vayne right now. It'll be obviously tempting to pick one of those tier 4s or even tier 5s over a tier 1. But if it can be really useful to your party, you might as well pick it up. Now, the third thing that you really want to look for is, do any of these characters hold a spatula? Because spatula can change the game in an instant. It's so powerful if you're able to use it correctly. Now, honestly, for the priority of things, I would say, can anything help you? Does anything have a spatula? Then, can I sabotage anything? Because most likely, if you've been following my tips, you're going to be way ahead anyway, and unfortunately, that means you're going to be picking last. Sometimes, if you're playing against noobs, they leave the spatula carrying champion, or even something that will help your team, because they're not paying attention to your team, right? So you might get lucky. But let's say you can't get any of these 3 things, right? Like nothing can really help you, you can't find a spatula, and your enemies already got whatever they need to get, right? So what you want to look for is an item you can build with something you're already holding. So like, it doesn't really matter what it is, preferably a tier 3. Sometimes you can get lucky. So one time I was holding a bow on a vein, and I was able to find, I can't remember what champion it was because I didn't really care. I just saw they were holding a rod. And if you put a rod and a bow together, it makes a Rage Blade. And now Rage Blade is super powerful, gives you +3 attack speed on every auto attack. And things just get pretty crazy because there's no attack speed limit for that item. But other than that, that's pretty much all there is to late game and mid game selections. But I will say in the very, very late game, there's going to be some selection choices where you know that your opponent has a rapid fire cannon on their ADC way in the back, and you don't have any way to access it because you don't have assassins. So you actually might want to pick a Blitzcrank walking around, just so you can access that ADC, and maybe your team will turn on them. It's kind of random how the team targets enemies, but you might get lucky enough where your team turns around and starts shooting the ADC so you can win the fight. And that's just a little extra thing. But anyways, let's get on to the next tip. So my final tip is me talking about a few late game synergies I like to see and some that you need to be cautioned about. And let's just get right into it. So one thing I want to say right away is that some synergies only work if you have a good front line to start with. So for example, I was just messing around in some game. I got there pretty late. I think I ended up 3rd or 4th, but I did a full gunslinger synergy, plus I had 3 pirates. I had Graves, Misfortune, Gangplank, and Tristana. So 3 pirates and 4 gunslingers total. I had an okay front line, but I had so many ranged. And it was just so tempting because I was like, well, I already got Graves and Tristana level 3. I'll throw in Gangplank level 2, and then I picked up Misfortune. I threw away a tank so I could have this synergy just to try it out. And it did some damage, but it just wouldn't win me the late game fights. So something like this would only work super late game when you're high enough level to have a decent front line, or you have the items to back you up. So maybe you pick up some Zephyrs, or maybe you pick up some Lockets, or maybe you pick up some Warmogs or Frozen Hearts, because these kinds of things just aren't going to work out like you think unless you're super suited up with items. Another one to watch out for sure is Elemental. Now obviously this one is pretty good because you get the Golem, but you don't get any like damage boost. So you better at least have, you know, Brand and some other decent elementals. Now usually on their own they're not that good, except for Brand. I will say Brand is very strong and he's a good character. But later in the game, I feel like that the elementals fall behind so hard, especially if your enemy has like a level 3 ADC in the back, maybe with rapid fire cannon or something. That Golem's not going to last very long. It's not going to do very much. And if you already have a good frontline, elementalists just aren't as good as you think they are. So I would really only go with this if you can get some level 3s for elementalists. Like if you have a level 3 Brand, yeah, I would definitely go for it because you're going to be able to deal enough damage. But this is one of those ones that just won't work unless you have a nice front line. Now I'm going to be talking about 2 synergies I really like. Now, one of them you have to build a team around, obviously, but one of them is definitely Phantom. So typically, if I was going to be playing to win, I would have a Mordekaiser throughout the game, and he would be paired with an other knight, whether it be Garen or something else, and I'm looking for Kindred. That is like the one character I'm looking for, because I already will have a range, whether it be Ashe or Vayne, or Varus or something like that. I'm looking for Kindred because as soon as you get Phantom, a random enemy starts at 100 HP. Now you might not think that's like a big deal. If it's their level 3 with full items that starts at 100 HP, they'll die in one hit. That's like their entire team, just gone in an instant. So Phantom is extremely powerful, and it's actually really hard to create, but it is a awesome late game synergy that you should be looking for if you have any characters that are Phantoms just laying around. Because if you can get a level 2 Kindred, if you can get a level 3 Mordekaiser, that's a pretty good combo right there going into stage 5, stage 6. So one of the 2 that I like for late game is Imperial. So Imperials do double damage. This is basically like having an assassin that doesn't have to work as hard, right? So they're going to be doing double damage. If you have a level 3 Draven with 3 items, he's going to be like taking out their team like 1 axe at a time. It's going to be crazy. And if you have a Darius front line with Frozen Heart, Warmogs, Redemption, I feel like there's no way you're going to lose, because your full tank is going to be doing twice as much as their level 3 tank, right? It's just ridiculous how crazy Imperial can be. Now, this synergy is extremely hard to construct because you need 4 Imperials, and there really is only 4 Imperials. One is Swain, which is a tier 5, one is Cat, one is Draven, and one is Darius. So not only do these not go super well together on their own, except for Imperial, but if you can somehow make this work, you're going to be winning a lot of fights. I really haven't seen anyone get a full Imperial team yet, but I've only done it a few times, and those times I just couldn't get it together with a nice front line. But if you could get a nice front line, if you're lucky enough, this is probably one of the most powerful synergies out there. Anyways guys, if you learned something from this video, make sure to leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe. Comment down below if you want to see some more teamfight tactics videos. I actually really like this game, and hopefully I do well when ranked comes out. What rank do you think I'm going to get? I think I'm going to be pretty high up there because I win a lot of the games that I play, or at least I get 3rd or higher. Anyways guys, I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one. Peace.